At lavish mansion wedding, millionaire woman marries homeless man. What happens after shocks all the sprawling Rosewood estate in the rolling hills of Napa Valley had never witnessed a more extraordinary wedding in its 100-year history. The mansion's manicured gardens bloomed with thousands of white roses and peonies, while crystal chandeliers cast rainbow prisms across marble floors that had hosted some of America's most powerful families for generations. Today, however, the estate would become the setting for a ceremony that would challenge every assumption about love, class, and social expectations. Victoria Ashworth stood before the ornate mirror in the mansion's bridal suite, adjusting the final details of her grandmother's vintage Chantilly lace gown. At 34, she commanded one of the most successful tech companies in Silicon Valley, her financial empire built through years of strategic investments and groundbreaking innovations. Her wedding dress, worth more than most people's annual salary, fit her petite frame perfectly, its intricate beadwork catching the afternoon light that streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows. But today was not about displaying wealth or maintaining social status. Victoria's heart raced with an emotion she had never expected to feel: genuine, transformative love for a man who possessed nothing but had given her everything that truly mattered. 6 months earlier, Victoria had encountered Marcus Thompson during one of her rare walks through downtown San Francisco. He had been sitting outside a coffee shop, not begging or demanding attention, but simply observing the world with the kind of quiet dignity that had immediately captured her attention. His clothes were worn but clean, his manner respectful, and his eyes held an intelligence that seemed at odds with his circumstances. What began as a simple act of kindness, buying him coffee and a meal, had evolved into daily conversations that revealed the depth of Marcus's character. He was a former university professor who had lost everything during a series of personal tragedies: his wife's death from cancer, the subsequent depression that cost him his tenure, and a cascade of financial problems that eventually left him homeless. But rather than becoming bitter, Marcus had maintained his dignity, his intellect, and his capacity for hope. Their relationship had developed slowly, built on genuine connection rather than circumstance. Victoria found herself drawn to Marcus's perspective on life, his ability to find beauty in simple moments, and his complete lack of interest in her wealth. For the first time in her adult life, she was valued for who she was rather than what she possessed. Now, as 300 of society's elite gathered in the mansion's gardens, Victoria prepared to make a statement that would shock them all. The guest list read like a who's who of American power and influence: tech moguls, entertainment industry giants, political figures, and old money aristocrats who had shaped the country's cultural landscape for generations. Among the assembled guests, conversations buzzed with barely concealed curiosity and judgment. Victoria's closest friends and business associates had tried to dissuade her from this course of action, warning her about the potential damage to her reputation and business interests. Her own family had staged what amounted to an intervention, questioning her sanity and suggesting that she was being manipulated by someone seeking her fortune. The most vocal opposition had come from her business partner, Jennifer Walsh, who viewed the marriage as a catastrophic error in judgment that could undermine their company's credibility with investors and clients. Jennifer had spent weeks researching Marcus's background, hiring private investigators to uncover any evidence of deception or ulterior motives, but had found only confirmation of his tragic circumstances and genuine character. Victoria's aunt, Margaret Ashworth Sterling, had been particularly harsh in her criticism. As the family matriarch and guardian of their social standing, Margaret viewed the marriage as a betrayal of everything the Ashworth name represented. She had threatened to disinherit Victoria and had actively discouraged other family members from attending the ceremony. But perhaps the most painful opposition had come from Victoria's younger sister, Amanda, whose concerns seemed genuinely motivated by love rather than social expectations. Amanda feared that Victoria was being taken advantage of, that her generous nature was being exploited by someone who saw her as a means to financial security rather than a genuine partner. As the ceremony hour approached, the tension among the wedding guests was palpable. Many had come not to celebrate, but to witness what they expected to be either a publicity stunt or a spectacular mistake. The media presence was overwhelming, with photographers and journalists positioned at every possible vantage point, eager to capture what promised to be one of the most controversial social events of the year. Marcus had spent the morning in a Wennigan guest cottage on the estate, preparing for a moment that still felt surreal to him. His wedding attire, an impeccably tailored tuxedo that Victoria had insisted on providing, felt foreign after months of wearing the same few sets of clothes. But more than the luxury surrounding him, Marcus was overwhelmed by the genuine love and acceptance he had found with Victoria. The transformation in his circumstances had been gradual and respectful. Victoria had never tried to rescue him in a patronizing way, but had instead offered partnership and mutual support. She had helped him find temporary housing, had connected him with resources for rebuilding his life, and had valued his input on her business decisions. Most importantly, she had seen past his circumstances to recognize the man he truly was. As the processional music began, the assembled guests turned to witness an entrance that would be remembered for decades. Victoria walked down the rose-petal-strewn aisle with the confidence of someone who had never doubted her choices, her bearing regal despite the whispers and stares that followed her progress. But the real shock came when Marcus took his place at the altar. Gone was any trace of the homeless man that many guests expected to see. Instead, they encountered a distinguished gentleman whose dignity and poise commanded respect. His transformation was not just physical, though the tailored tuxedo certainly helped, but emanated from an inner confidence that could not be manufactured or faked. The efficient Pastor Williams from the community church, where Victoria and Marcus had been attending services together, began the ceremony with words about the true nature of love and commitment. His message was pointed, addressing the judgment and skepticism that permeated the gathering while celebrating the genuine connection he had witnessed between the couple. As the vows were exchanged, even the most cynical guests began to recognize something authentic in the interaction between Victoria and Marcus. Their words to each other spoke of mutual respect, genuine affection, and a shared vision for their future together. This was not the hollow performance that many had expected, but the real thing. Two people who had found in each other exactly what they needed. The first signs of the broader implications came during the reception. Several prominent business leaders approached Marcus, curious about his background and perspectives. His intelligence and educational credentials became apparent as he engaged in sophisticated conversations about literature, philosophy, and social issues. The homeless man they had expected to pity or dismiss proved to be more intellectually engaging than many of the society figures present, but not everyone was willing to accept this transformation. A group of Victoria's business associates, led by her former romantic interest, Charles Whitmore III, began circulating rumors about Marcus's motives and Victoria's mental state. Charles, whose own proposal had been rejected 6 months earlier, seemed particularly invested in proving that the marriage was a mistake. The tension reached a breaking point during the reception dinner when Charles publicly questioned Marcus's intentions, suggesting that his sudden good fortune was suspiciously convenient. The confrontation was subtle but vicious, designed to humiliate Marcus and force him to reveal any hidden agenda. Marcus's response was masterful. Rather than becoming defensive or angry, he spoke eloquently about his journey from homelessness to this moment, acknowledging his good fortune while making it clear that his love for Victoria was genuine and unconditional. His dignity in the face of public challenge impressed even his harshest critics. As the evening progressed, the initial shock and skepticism began to give way to grudging acceptance among some guests. Victoria's happiness was undeniable, and Marcus's character was becoming increasingly apparent. But beneath the surface celebration, currents of disapproval and concern continued to flow, setting the stage for the challenges that would follow. The wedding night concluded with Victoria and Marcus alone in the mansion's master suite, surrounded by luxury that felt both wonderful and overwhelming. They had successfully navigated the first test of their unconventional union, but both understood that the real challenges were just beginning. The world would be watching their every move, waiting for any sign that their critics had been right about the impossibility of their love story. 3 months after the lavish wedding that had scandalized San Francisco's elite society, Victoria and Marcus Thompson settled into a routine that defied every prediction made by their critics. Rather than the disaster that many had anticipated, their marriage appeared to be thriving in ways that challenged fundamental assumptions about love, class, and social mobility. The first surprise came when Marcus began working alongside Victoria at her tech company, not as a charity case or token gesture, but as a genuine contributor whose insights proved invaluable. His academic background in sociology and economics, combined with his recent experience of homelessness, provided unique perspectives on social impact technology that the company had never considered. Marcus's presence in the corporate offices initially created awkwardness among Victoria's employees and business partners. Many expected him to be overwhelmed by the fast-paced, high-stakes environment, but instead he demonstrated remarkable adaptability and insight. His contributions to strategic planning sessions were thoughtful and innovative, drawing from both his academic training and his lived experience of society's margins. The transformation was not just professional but personal. Marcus had regained the confidence and bearing that had been eroded by years of homelessness and social invisibility. He carried himself with the quiet authority of someone who had survived the worst life could offer and emerged stronger. His relationship with Victoria had restored not just his circumstances but his sense of self-worth and purpose. Victoria, meanwhile, found herself changed by the experience of loving someone who valued her for reasons that had nothing to do with wealth or status. For the first time in her adult life, she was in a relationship based on genuine compatibility rather than social expectations or business advantages. Marcus's influence had helped her reconnect with values and priorities that her success had obscured. But the real shock came during a routine background check conducted by the company's security team for Marcus's official employment. What they discovered would rewrite everything the world thought it knew about this unconventional marriage. The investigation, initially intended to satisfy insurance requirements and board member concerns, uncovered records that had been sealed for decades. Marcus Thompson was not simply a former university professor who had fallen on hard times. He was the heir to one of America's oldest and most substantial family fortunes, a trust fund worth over $200 million that he had deliberately walked away from 15 years earlier. The Thompson family name carried weight in American business and philanthropic circles, though Marcus had been estranged from his family for so long that the connection had been forgotten by most. His grandfather had built a railroad empire in the early 20th century, and subsequent generations had diversified into banking, real estate, and technology investments. Marcus had been groomed from childhood to take his place in this dynasty. The truth about Marcus's past was more complex and heartbreaking than anyone had imagined. Following his wife's death from cancer, Marcus had discovered that his family's wealth had been built partly through investments in companies that denied cancer treatments to patients who couldn't afford them. The pharmaceutical holdings that had made his family rich had directly contributed to the kind of suffering that had taken his beloved wife's life. In a decision that his family viewed as temporary insanity, Marcus had renounced his inheritance and walked away from a life of privilege that he could no longer morally justify. His descent into homelessness had been deliberate, a form of penance and an attempt to understand the lives of those affected by his family's business practices. He had chosen poverty as a way of atoning for wealth that he viewed as morally Compromised. The revelation exploded across social media and news outlets with the force of a natural disaster. The homeless man who had married a millionaire was actually wealthier than his bride. He had simply chosen to live without his fortune. The narrative that had captivated the public, rich woman rescues homeless man, was completely inverted. This was not a story of charity or social climbing, but of two wealthy individuals who had found authentic love despite their circumstances. Victoria's reaction to learning about Marcus's hidden wealth was complex and revealing. Rather than feeling deceived or manipulated, she was impressed by the moral courage it had taken for him to walk away from everything he had been given. His decision to choose principle over comfort, to sacrifice luxury for integrity, made her love him even more deeply. The public response was immediate and dramatic. Those who had criticized the marriage as a publicity stunt or an act of misguided charity found themselves forced to confront a completely different reality. Marcus had not been seeking Victoria's money, he had been avoiding his own. Their love story was not about financial disparity, but about two people who had found in each other something more valuable than material wealth. The revelation also exposed the shallow assumptions and prejudices that had shaped public opinion about their relationship. Society's obsession with wealth and status had blinded observers to the possibility that someone might choose poverty over morally compromised riches. Marcus's homelessness had been viewed as a failure rather than a deliberate choice born of principle. Marcus's family, who had spent 15 years trying to locate him and convince him to reclaim his inheritance, suddenly found themselves thrust back into his life. His younger brother, David Thompson, emerged as a spokesperson for the family, expressing their joy at discovering Marcus alive and well, but also their continued bewilderment at his choices. The Thompson family's attempts at reconciliation created new pressures for Marcus and Victoria. There were expectations that Marcus would now reclaim his rightful place in society, that he would return to the world of wealth and privilege that he had rejected. But Marcus had found something in his years of homelessness that he was unwilling to surrender: a clarity of purpose and authentic connection to his values that wealth had obscured. Victoria's business empire also faced unexpected challenges, as investors and partners struggled to understand the implications of Marcus's revelation. Some viewed his hidden wealth as validation of their marriage, while others saw his rejection of family money as evidence of instability or poor judgment. The couple found themselves navigating complex business relationships that had been built on assumptions that were now proven false. But perhaps the most profound impact was on Marcus and Victoria's relationship itself. The revelation had removed the last barrier between them, the unconscious power imbalance that had existed when everyone believed Victoria was the only wealthy partner. Now they stood as equals, two people who had chosen love over social expectations, principle over convenience. Their decision about Marcus's inheritance became a test of their shared values. After extensive discussion and consultation with financial advisors and philanthropic experts, they chose to accept the inheritance but immediately establish a foundation dedicated to healthcare access and homelessness prevention. The money that Marcus had rejected would now be used to address the problems that had originally driven him away. The foundation's work began immediately, funding medical treatments for cancer patients who couldn't afford care and establishing housing programs for the homeless. Marcus's experience of living on the streets provided invaluable insight into effective interventions, while Victoria's business acumen ensured that resources were used efficiently and sustainably. As news of their philanthropic plan spread, public opinion shifted once again. The couple, who had been viewed with skepticism and curiosity, were now seen as examples of how wealth could be used responsibly and compassionately. Their love story had evolved from scandal to inspiration, demonstrating that true partnership could transcend social boundaries and create positive change. The mansion that had hosted their controversial wedding became the headquarters for their foundation, its opulent rooms transformed into offices dedicated to social justice work. The estate that had once symbolized aristocratic privilege now represented the possibility of using resources to address society's most pressing problems. Marcus and Victoria's marriage had survived not just the initial shock and criticism, but the revelation that challenged everything the world thought it knew about their relationship. Their love had proven strong enough to withstand public scrutiny, family pressure, and the complex emotions surrounding wealth and responsibility. In the end, their story became a powerful reminder that true love transcended circumstances, that authenticity was more valuable than social approval, and that the choices people made about money and privilege revealed the content of their character. The homeless man and the millionaire had found in each other not just romantic fulfillment, but partners in creating a more just and compassionate world.
Thank you for watching this story unfold with us here on M&A The Story Unfolds. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new tale. We'd love to know where you're watching. Leave a comment below and tell us what part of the world you're joining us from. Your support means everything. See you in the next story.